Millionaire abandons his wife and child without looking back. But years later, upon encountering her in a hotel with another man, he experiences an unexpected revelation. Ethan Parker was back in New York City, but the city that once made him feel invincible now resembled a maze of loneliness. The luxurious hotel lobby in Manhattan exuded a glamour he knew well. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, reflecting shimmering lights on polished marble. Yet even surrounded by all that opulence, the feeling of emptiness enveloped him like a dense fog. He walked to the window of his room, where the panoramic view of the city greeted him with its bright lights and bustling streets. New York, the city that never sleeps, Ethan murmured to himself, his eyes wandering over the busy streets below. The image of Sarah, his ex-wife, came to mind like a distant echo. He remembered how they used to stroll through those same streets, him holding her hand, laughing and dreaming of the future. Now all that remained was a past that felt like a closed book, its pages yellowed and worn by time. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts, and he answered it with little enthusiasm. It was his assistant, reminding him of the dinner he had scheduled at the hotel restaurant. "It's time to get back to business, Ethan," the assistant said, his words sounding like an order disguised as concern. "You can't let yourself get down." Ethan's response was a simple, "I'm on my way," but his mind was elsewhere. In the restaurant, the atmosphere was vibrant, filled with laughter and animated conversations. He sat at a secluded table, a drink in hand, his thoughts drifting to another place. Then his gaze landed on a nearby table where a familiar sight hit him like a punch to the gut. Sarah was there, radiant and smiling, sitting across from David, the man who had supported her after his departure. Her laughter echoed like music, but for Ethan it was dissonant notes. He recalled the moments when she smiled that way beside him, and a knot formed in his throat. "I let her go," he thought, the pain reverberating in his chest. He tried to look away but couldn't. The image of David leaning in to whisper something in her ear unsettled him. Ethan stood up, determined to leave, but his steps hesitated. A waiter passed by him, and in a moment of weakness, Ethan decided to approach Sarah's table. "Hi," he said, his voice coming out quieter than he intended. Sarah's gaze lifted, her eyes widening in surprise, and then a mix of emotions crossed her face. "Ethan," she replied, her voice trembling as if she were balancing on a tightrope between the past and the present. "What are you doing here?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. I'm back in the city. Needed some time, and it looks like you're doing well." David observed the interaction with a neutral expression, but Ethan could feel the tension in the air. "Yes, I am. And you? How have you been?" Sarah asked, a faint smile forming, but her eyes betrayed a sadness he knew well. "Working, as always," Ethan replied, trying to sound casual, but there was a crack in his voice that didn't go unnoticed. "Working or running away?" David interjected, his deep voice cutting through the air between them. Ethan turned to David, the challenge in his eyes clear as day. "Running away is a strong word. I'm just trying to understand what I did," Ethan said, the weight of his past decision heavy on each word. The atmosphere grew tense, and Sarah looked between them, as if trying to mediate a dispute that wasn't hers to resolve. "Come on, this isn't the time or place," she said, her voice soft yet firm. Ethan felt his heart tighten. He wanted to speak, to explain the choice he made years ago, but the words felt stuck in his throat. I miss you," he said, breaking the silence. The impact of the phrase hung in the air, an echo of the past that they both had tried to bury. Sarah looked away, the emotion reflected on her face a mix of pain and longing. "Ethan, we can't go back." And so, as the city pulsed around them, the echoes of past choices and uncertainty about the future intertwined, creating a tangled web of feelings that neither knew how to untangle. In Sarah's cozy apartment, morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the walls adorned with pictures and artwork. Sitting on the couch, surrounded by piles of albums, she flipped through yellowed pages that held memories of times gone by. Ethan's laughter echoed in her mind as she gazed at photos of them together, radiant smiles and passionate glances. But nostalgia was a treacherous feeling, and soon a shadow of sadness enveloped her heart. "Why do you still keep this?" David's voice, her current partner, interrupted her thoughts. He entered the room, bringing with him the aroma of fresh coffee. "You shouldn't dwell on the past." "I know, but sometimes it's hard to let go," Sarah replied, her gaze distant. "These photos represent a part of my life that Well, I can't just forget. David moved closer and sat beside her, trying to understand the emotional storm consuming her. But you have a future with me. We can't live trapped in what's already happened, Sarah. I love you and I want to build something beautiful with you. She forced a smile, but the truth was that the image of Ethan still haunted her. I love you too, David. But with Ethan back in town, all of this makes me question my choices. I wonder if I really made the right decision in leaving him. He's no longer part of your life, Sarah. You've moved on, haven't you? David pressed, his voice tinged with insecurity. You're with me now. I know, but things aren't that simple. She stood up, walking to the window to observe the chaos outside. The city's turmoil mirrored the confusion inside her. What I feel for you is real, but the past doesn't just disappear. David sighed, frustrated. I want you to be fully present with me. I can't compete with a ghost. David, it's not about competition. It's just a process. I need time to find my balance. Sarah turned to face David's intense gaze. You are important to me, but I can't disregard what my heart feels. Meanwhile, Ethan, at his luxurious hotel in Manhattan, sat at a bar, nursing a glass of whiskey in his hands. The weight of solitude pressed on him and the memory of Sarah left him restless. He recalled his decision to leave, focusing on his career without considering the impact it would have on his personal life. He wondered if there was still time to fix things. Amidst these thoughts, an ex-colleague, Mark, entered the bar and greeted him. Ethan, I can't believe you're back. How have you been? Mark said with a friendly smile, though concern was evident in his eyes. Oh, you know how it is. Work never stops, Ethan replied, trying to steer the conversation away. What about you? What have you been up to? Working, of course. But more importantly, what happened with you and Sarah? I heard she's seeing someone new, Mark asked, observing Ethan's expression, which immediately closed off. It's complicated, Ethan sighed, taking a sip of his drink. I left her, and now, it feels like I've lost everything. You need to confront this, man. Life isn't just about money and success. What really matters to you? Mark questioned, touching on Ethan's open wound. Do you still love Sarah? Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, reliving the image of her next to David. Yes, I love her, but I don't know if she feels the same anymore. I hurt her. Sometimes we have to face our fears. If you really love her, you should fight for her, Mark said, raising his glass in a toast. To second chances. Meanwhile, back at Sarah's apartment, tension hung in the air. She looked at David and said, I need some time to think. I don't want to do anything that might hurt you. And what if Ethan comes back around? What will you do? David asked, his voice tense. I don't know. I can't promise that my feelings will just disappear, Sarah replied, her heart heavy with uncertainty. But I promise to try to be honest with you. Honesty is all I ask, he replied, a mix of hope and desperation in his eyes. Just don't leave me in the dark. I can't do that. I value you and what we have, Sarah declared. But doubt still pulsed within her. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with decisions that could change their lives forever. Jack Parker sat at a table in the college cafe, his eyes fixed on the laptop screen. The atmosphere around him was filled with students chatting, laughing, and enjoying the early autumn afternoon. The leaves on the campus trees were tinged with orange and yellow, creating a scene that should have been comforting, but only seemed to intensify his sense of loneliness. He had an assignment to submit, but his mind was elsewhere. Memories of his father, Ethan, haunted him like ghosts. Hey Jack, are you okay? A friend, Lucas, asked as he approached the table. The tone of concern in Lucas's voice made Jack divert his gaze from the screen. Oh, I'm just thinking about some things, Jack replied, trying to force a smile. Lucas sat down across from him, observing his friend closely. Thinking about who? Your mom? Or that guy you haven't seen in years? He paused, his expression becoming more serious. It's been a while since you talked about your dad. Before we continue with this emotional story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any tales. And let us know in the comments which city you're watching this video from. Jack rolled his eyes and closed the laptop with a sharp motion. I don't want to talk about it, Lucas. I don't want to think about him. Anger was palpable in his voice, and he knew he was being unfair. But the pain he felt was hard to control, like a fire ready to consume everything around him. Look, I understand that he hurt you, but it's better to deal with it than to keep it all inside. Do you care about him? Lucas insisted, his voice friendly but firm. Do I care? Jack laughed, but there was no joy in his laughter. How can I care about someone who just decided to leave? He was so focused on becoming a billionaire that he forgot he had a family. I know you're hurt, but maybe it's time to let it out. He's back in town, isn't he? Lucas said, trying to be a loyal friend. The mention of Ethan made Jack's heart race. He wasn't even sure what he felt. Anger, sadness, confusion. Yeah, he is. But that doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change how I felt when he left. You need to express that, man. Have you thought about joining the theater group? It could be therapeutic, Lucas suggested, trying to spark a glimmer of hope. Jack hesitated. The theater group was promoting an improv class next week, but the idea of getting on stage and exposing his life made him anxious. Theater? Seriously? I don't know if that's for me. I'm not good at acting. It's not about acting, Jack. It's about expressing yourself. It could be your chance to let it all out, Lucas encouraged. It'll be fun, and you might surprise yourself with what you can do. Jack looked at his friend, feeling a slight shift in his heart. Maybe I'll think about it, he said, still unsure. But something inside him was moving, as if a door was slowly creaking open. In the days that followed, Ethan's presence loomed over him like a shadow. Jack found himself thinking about his father during classes, conversations with friends, and even during lonely nights in his room. A whirlwind of emotions enveloped him, and he felt increasingly lost. At the same time, the idea of joining the theater group began to transform into a light at the end of the tunnel. During a theater class, the teacher asked each student to share something personal. When it was his turn, Jack hesitated. He looked around at the curious faces waiting for his contribution. The hesitation consumed him, but as he gazed at the encouraging expression of the teacher, something broke inside him. I don't know if I can, he murmured, his voice trembling. You can, Jack, go ahead, the teacher encouraged. Taking a deep breath, he began. My dad abandoned me when I was little. He went after success and left my mom and me behind. Now he's back, and I don't know how to deal with it. The words came out with difficulty, but as he spoke, a wave of relief enveloped him. He was finally expressing the pain he had carried for so many years. When he finished, silence filled the room. Jack looked around, expecting to see judgmental gazes, but instead found understanding. A classmate approached him and said, "Thank you for sharing that. It's brave of you." Jack felt warmth rise to his face, but also a sense of liberation. He realized that art could be a means to heal his wounds, and perhaps this was the first step towards confronting the father who had hurt him so much. Sarah sat at a table in the small Italian restaurant she frequented with David, observing the cozy environment, but feeling strangely distant. The soft lights and lit candles created a romantic atmosphere, but her mind was far away. Sarah absent-mindedly stirred her plate of pasta, while David excitedly talked about his new job proposal. He had a charming way about him, always so optimistic, but something weighed heavily on Sarah's heart. "You're so quiet today, love," David said, leaning toward her. His eyes were filled with concern. "Is everything okay?" She took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Yeah, I'm just thinking about some things. Life and how everything has changed, you know?" David hesitated, his expression shifting slightly. "You're thinking about Ethan, aren't you? He's back in town. Everyone's tell." "It's complicated," Sarah replied, looking out the window as the rain began to fall, creating a melancholic backdrop. "I thought I had moved on, but when I saw the news about him, it felt like an echo from the past." "I understand, but you have to remember that we're together now," David said, trying to hold Sarah's hand, which she instinctively pulled away from. "I worry about you. I just want you to be happy." "I know, David," she replied, her voice soft but distant. "You've been amazing and I really care about you. But some things aren't easy to let go of. I can't help but think about what happened between me and Ethan and how things could have been different." Silence settled between them and Sarah felt the pressure of doubt growing. Sensing the tension, David changed the subject. "How about we make plans for next month? Maybe a trip to the countryside? Somewhere far from all this?" "I'd love that," Sarah said, but her mind was full of memories. Ethan's gaze, the sunny days they spent together, the joy she felt when he was by her side. A part of her still wondered if there was room for them somewhere in the past, even if it meant reopening wounds that never really healed. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Ethan walked the streets of Manhattan, his heart heavy. He remembered his earlier conversation with a former coworker who had questioned what truly mattered in his life. "Ethan, you're alone at the top. What have you really gained from it?" Those words echoed in his mind. He sat down in a cafe, staring outside, lost in thought. The city pulsed with life. but he felt like a spectator. Loneliness enveloped him, and he wondered what he had done with his life by prioritizing his career over his family. The decision to leave had been impulsive, and now, seeing Sarah with David, the pain became almost unbearable. In the heart of the confusion, Jack, his son, struggled with his own demons. In college, he felt pressured to succeed, but behind his confident facade lay an emptiness. A close friend, upon learning of Ethan's return, didn't hesitate to share the news. "Hey, did you hear your dad is back? This could be a good chance for you guys to reconnect." Jack felt a wave of anger and confusion. To him, Ethan was a stranger, a man who had chosen to walk out of their lives without a second thought. "Reconnect? He abandoned me. What does he want now?" he retorted, his voice filled with frustration. The idea of confronting his father began to form in his mind, a desire to understand why everything had happened. Meanwhile, Sarah, encouraged by a friend who visited recently, started writing about her experiences. The idea of putting her feelings into words felt liberating. "You should write about it, Sarah. Your story is powerful. You've been through so much and you're still here, strong. People need to hear this," her friend said excitedly. "Do you think it's worth it?" Sarah asked, hesitant. "Absolutely. Writing can be a form of healing. You might find clarity in what you've lived through, and who knows, you could help others who have gone through similar situations." With those words in mind, Sarah began jotting down ideas, seeking depth in her pain and her triumphs. She wanted to understand not only what happened between her and Ethan, but also her own journey of overcoming. Writing became a refuge, a way to reconnect with herself. Meanwhile, Jack decided to join a theater group at his college, seeking an escape from his rage. He longed for a space where he could express his emotions, but Ethan's presence always lingered in his mind, like a shadow he couldn't shake off. The desire to understand his father grew, even as he tried to ignore it. The atmosphere at the gala was charged with glamour and expectation, but in Ethan's heart, an unbearable weight accumulated. He was surrounded by unfamiliar faces smiling and chatting about business, fashion, and art, while his gaze searched for a single point of reference. Sarah. The soft glow of the candles reflected off her red dress, and her laughter echoed in his mind, each laugh a reminder of everything he had lost. Ethan took a deep breath and approached the table where Sarah and David were seated. The background music seemed to fade as he got closer. David, a tall man with a charming smile, leaned toward Sarah, whispering something that made her laugh. The scene hit him like a punch to the gut. He hesitated, stopping for a moment to absorb the image. Sarah, so happy by another man's side, while he felt like a stranger in his own life. "Ethan," Sarah greeted him, surprise lighting up her eyes. David watched her, his expression tightening slightly upon realizing Ethan's presence. "You came," Sarah added, trying to keep her voice light. "Yeah, I needed to see you," Ethan replied, his voice quieter than he intended. He forced a smile, trying to hide the storm raging inside him. "Looks like you're having fun." "We are," David interjected, a note of possessiveness in his voice. "It's been a special night, hasn't it, Sarah?" "Yes, very special," Sarah affirmed, but her expression revealed an internal conflict. The look she cast at Ethan was a mix of nostalgia and pain. The tension was palpable, and Ethan felt the air around them grow thick. "It's good to see you again, David," Ethan said, trying to sound cordial, but the coldness in his voice was undeniable. "You too," David replied, not bothering to hide his disdain. "How have you been? I heard rumors that you're back in town." "Working, as always," Ethan said, the muscles in his face tightening. He looked at Sarah, a silent plea for understanding in his eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here with him. And I didn't expect to see you here again," Sarah said, a hint of sadness in her voice. "It's different." "Differently how?" Ethan echoed, his voice rising a bit. "Different how? Are you happy? Does he make you happy?" Sarah hesitated, the question weighing heavily on her. I'm trying to be happy, Ethan, but it's complicated." "Complicated?" Ethan laughed without humor. "You think I don't know what complicated is? I do. I left it all behind. I left you. I left our son." He felt the anger and pain in his words, an echo of a past he couldn't shake off. "Ethan, please," David said, his voice rising. "This isn't the time or place to discuss this. What do you know about right or wrong? You weren't there when everything fell apart." Ethan shot back, the fury building inside him. He didn't want to fight, but every word felt like a blow, every memory a fresh wound. "Enough," Sarah exclaimed, her voice slicing through the tension like a knife. "Stop. This isn't going anywhere." She looked at Ethan, her eyes shimmering with repressed tears. "I'm not the same person I was when you left. I can't turn back time and neither can you." "Then what are you going to do?" Ethan asked, his heart racing. "Stay with him? With David? After everything we had?" "Ethan, that's unfair," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "You can't just show up and expect everything to go back to normal. I can't just forget what happened." Her words hit him like a punch to the stomach. He felt lost, as if he were navigating a sea of uncertainties. The past loomed there, spectral and oppressive, while David stood by like a guardian between them. Ethan felt his dreams of reconciliation fading, and the reality of his solitude settling in. I just wanted a chance to correct my mistakes," Ethan murmured, vulnerability creeping into his voice. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding but also pain. "Sometimes, Ethan, that's not how life works." And so, amidst loaded silences and glances that spoke more than words, the three stood still, each trapped in their own echoes of the past, questioning what the future might hold. The gala was pulsing with vibrant energy, but at the heart of the crowd, a knot of tension began to form. Ethan, dressed in a sharp suit, tried to ignore the tightness in his chest as he watched Sarah and David chatting animatedly, a light smile on her lips that made him feel a mix of longing and regret. He remembered the last time he saw her like that, and guilt wrapped around him like a thick fog. When Jack, his son, approached, Ethan sensed a change in the atmosphere. The teenager, eyes shining with contained anger, positioned himself between Ethan and Sarah, as if shielding his mother from a ghost of the past. "Why are you here, Dad?" Jack's voice sounded louder than he intended, drawing the attention of everyone around. Ethan swallowed hard, feeling the weight of expectation on his shoulders. "Jack, I just wanted to talk to your mother. I didn't mean to cause discomfort," he replied, trying to remain calm, but his voice betrayed the vulnerability he felt. "Discomfort? Is that what you call leaving us?" "Discomfort?" Jack shot back, anger spilling over. "You left and never looked back. Now you come back like nothing happened? What do you expect? That everything will be fine just because you decided to show up?" Sarah, watching the scene unfold, felt a wave of despair wash over her. "Jack, please, you don't have to do this," she pleaded, but it was too late. Her son's words echoed in the room, and the tension between the three intensified. "No, Mom, he needs to hear this. You don't know how long I waited for him, and when I finally see him, this is the kind of conversation we have. He doesn't care about us," Jack said, tears threatening to spill from his eyes. "You don't know how hard it is to live with your absence, Dad. I'm not a kid anymore. I know you left because of your career, but what about us? What were we to you?" Ethan felt his heart constrict. "Jack, I made mistakes. I thought if I could achieve success, I could give you both a better life. But I was so focused that I didn't realize what I was leaving behind," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. He wanted Jack to understand, but the words felt inadequate. Jack shook his head, disdain etched on his face. "You think success and money are enough? You weren't there when I needed you? When your absence made me feel like I wasn't good enough? You have no idea what that's like." He turned to Sarah, seeking support, and she felt her heart break seeing the pain in her son's eyes. The world around them seemed to fade away. Sarah felt the weight of the situation and decided to intervene. "Ethan, you can't just show up and expect everything to be okay. Jack is right, you left and created a void. It's not easy for him to deal with this," she said, her voice firm but laced with sadness. The tension became palpable, and Ethan faced Sarah, emotions spilling over. "I know I can't change the past, but I'm here now. I want to make things right. I want to try to be part of your lives again," he said, sincerity shining in his eyes. "It's too late for that," Jack murmured, frustration mingling with his anger. "You have no idea what that means to me. You don't know what I've been through." Sarah felt like the whole world was caught in a moment of pain and despair. Jack's words struck Ethan like an arrow, and he felt the weight of guilt crush him. I'm so sorry, Jack," Ethan said, his voice barely a whisper. "I never meant to hurt you. If I could go back in time, I'd do everything differently." But the words didn't seem enough. The trio stood in heavy silence, surrounded by people dancing and laughing, completely oblivious to the emotional confrontation happening around them. Each of them was trapped in their own echoes of the past, unsure of how to move forward. The gala was in full swing, the music captivating and the twinkling lights reflecting the opulence of the venue. However, the atmosphere felt suffocating for Ethan, Sarah, and Jack, whose emotions were raw and exposed. Tension mounted with each passing moment, as if the air was charged with electricity. Jack, still consumed by pent-up rage, glared at Ethan with an intensity that could cut glass. David, sensing the heavy mood, approached Jack. "Hey, let's step outside for some fresh air," he suggested, trying to ease the tension. Jack looked at him with disdain. "You don't understand, do you? He's not just some guy who came back. He's my dad, and I can't just ignore that." Jack's voice was choked, and David's expression was a mix of concern and helplessness. Meanwhile, Sarah stepped back a little, observing the scene with a broken heart. The memory of happy moments with Ethan and the pain of seeing him now, so close yet so distant, consumed her. She approached Ethan, who was in a corner trying to grasp the depth of the emotion surrounding him. "Ethan, you need to talk to Jack," she said, her voice soft but firm. "He's hurting, and you need to acknowledge that." Ethan looked into her eyes. Pain reflected on his face. "I know, Sarah. I know I made bad choices. But I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if he'll want to hear me." Ethan's vulnerability was palpable, and Sarah realized that despite his fortune, he still carried the weight of his decisions. At that moment, the music stopped, and the attention of the guests turned to the small scene unfolding. Unable to bear the pressure any longer, Jack charged toward Ethan. "You don't understand, do you? You just left, you abandoned us, I grew up without you, and now you want what? To come back and act like nothing happened?" His voice echoed through the hall, and all eyes were fixed on the broken family. "Jack!" Sarah shouted, but Ethan raised his hand, asking for silence. He knew it was time to face the consequences of his actions. "I have no excuses, Jack. I was selfish. I left you and your mother behind in search of something that in the end wasn't worth it. The truth is, I miss you every day. I miss both of you, and I feel like a complete failure as a father," Ethan confessed, his voice trembling with emotion. Jack hesitated, anger battling with pain. "And now? What do you want from us? A forgiveness you don't deserve?" The young man was on the verge of tears, frustration turning into a whirlwind of emotions. "I'm not here to demand forgiveness, Jack. I'm here to ask for a chance. A chance to be the father I should have been. I understand that you're hurt, and that I caused that, but I want to rebuild if you let me," Ethan said, his voice now quieter but intense. Sarah watched the conversation, her heart divided. She knew Jack's hurt was real, but she also saw sincerity in Ethan's eyes. "Jack, maybe it's time to consider how you really feel. It's not just about what Ethan did or didn't do. It's about how you want to move forward," Sarah suggested, trying to intervene constructively. "How can you say that? He wasn't there when I needed him most," Jack shot back, frustration spilling over. "You don't understand how much this hurt me." I understand very well," Sarah replied, her voice laden with emotion. "But we need to look ahead. Ethan regrets it, and that's a start. We can't change the past, but we can decide how to react to it." At that moment, the tension began to dissipate, but the wound was still exposed. Ethan made a hesitant move toward Jack. "Please, let me show you that I can change, that I can be the father you need. I'm here now, and I want to make this work." Ethan's words hung in the air, and Jack, caught in the conflict, felt his father's vulnerability. Anger still pulsed within him, but there was a glimmer of hope. The party around them continued, but in that instant the world seemed to stop. After the party, the atmosphere was thick with tension, hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Sarah, her heart racing, left the venue. The night had been a whirlwind of emotions, and every word exchanged between Ethan, Jack, and David echoed in her mind. Walking through the illuminated streets of Manhattan, she felt the need to step away and reflect on everything that had happened. It was as if the echoes of the past were following her, whispering truths she wasn't yet ready to confront. "Why do I always put myself in this position?" she murmured to herself, gazing at the city lights flickering like distant stars. She remembered the conversation she had with David earlier that day. He looked her in the eyes, concern etched on his face. "Sarah, I know Ethan is back and that this could be complicated, but I want you to know I'm here for you. You don't have to go through this alone." She shook her head, trying to push away the confusion that overwhelmed her. "David, I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm losing control of my life. What happened between me and Ethan was intense, but that doesn't mean I don't care about you." The memory of their conversation tightened her chest. As she walked, she decided that she needed some time alone. Maybe I should go to the cabin, she thought. The place had always been a refuge for her, a space where she could reconnect with herself, away from the pressures of the city and the expectations of others. Across the city, Jack sat on his bed, anger still boiling inside him. How could he just come back and expect everything to be fine? He shouted into the void, his fist clenched on the duvet. The echo of his words seemed to resonate in his mind. He picked up the notebook lying on the table, its blank pages seeming like a mirror to his own confusion. If only I could write all this down. Maybe I could understand. He began to scribble, words spilling out uncontrollably. Ethan Parker, absentee father and billionaire, always more concerned with being someone than being a dad. With each line, the anger he felt organized itself into letters, and for a brief moment he felt he could free himself from the weight he carried. You abandoned me, and now you want to come back as if nothing ever happened? Meanwhile, Sarah arrived at the cabin surrounded by the tranquility of nature. The cool breeze and the sound of rustling leaves helped clear her mind. She sat in one of the porch chairs, her gaze lost among the trees. I need some time to think about all this, she said aloud, as if the trees were her confidants. I can't just ignore how I feel about Ethan, but I also can't leave David behind. He's done everything he can to support me. With a deep sigh, she began jotting down her thoughts in a notebook she always carried. What do I really want? What's best for me and for Jack? The words flowed, sentences intertwining with phrases that revealed not only her struggles, but also her hopes. Life is about choices and I need to make mine. Meanwhile, Jack was also in a moment of introspection. He looked at his notebook, now filled with notes and outbursts. Writing might be my way to deal with this, he thought, deciding he would no longer ignore his feelings. He stood up, determined to create a piece that would capture his pain and struggle. If I can share this, maybe I can understand it better and, who knows, forgive. The echoes of the past were becoming more evident, but at the same time, the possibility of a new beginning was present. Sarah and Jack, each in their own way, were ready to face the challenges ahead, seeking a way to transform their experiences into something new and meaningful. Ethan fell silent after the tumultuous party. The music still echoed in his mind, but the true sound resonating was the lament of his broken relationship with his son, Jack. He knew he needed to change. The time had come to act. As he looked out the window of his luxurious Manhattan apartment, the vibrant city before him seemed full of promises, yet Ethan was trapped in a feeling of guilt that prevented him from enjoying the beauty of the moment. I can't keep going like this, he murmured to himself, feeling the weight of his own words. With renewed determination, he decided it was time to reconnect with Jack. I need to find him, Ethan said, already reaching for the phone to call his son's college. Jack's words were still fresh in his mind. The pain and anger he had expressed had left an indelible mark on Ethan's heart. If I can just have a conversation with him, maybe we can find a way forward together, he thought. Meanwhile, in her Brooklyn apartment, Sarah sat at the table, surrounded by blank sheets of paper and colorful pens. The emotional storm she had felt at the party still affected her. Maybe I should write about this, she thought, recalling the encouragement from a friend who had visited her. With a pen in hand, she began to scribble her memories, her struggles, and her victories. It's time to put into words what I feel, she told herself, her voice firm, as if the simple act of writing could free her from her past. Are you okay, love? David asked, entering the room and observing Sarah's concentration. He noticed the spark in her eyes as she wrote. It looks like you're in another world. I'm just trying to organize my thoughts, Sarah replied, not taking her gaze off the paper. It's a way to understand what happened, what I really want. David hesitated. You know you can share this with me, right? I'm not a threat to your past. It's not that, David, she said, setting the pen aside for a moment. It's just that I need time to understand everything. Ethan, he's still a part of my life, and that confuses me. I understand, he replied, but concern was evident in his tone. I just want you to know I'm here for whatever you need. Meanwhile, Jack was in his room surrounded by books and notes. He had joined the theater group, but the presence of Ethan in his mind was a shadow that followed him. Why did he come back now? Jack grumbled, throwing a notebook onto the table. After all this time away, why can't he just leave things as they are? But in a moment of frustration, he decided he needed to channel that anger. I'm going to write about this, he thought, grabbing a new notebook. If he can't hear me, maybe the words can. The next day, Jack showed up at the theater group, where his friends were already rehearsing a new play. Hey, Jack, ready to shine? A fellow actor teased, but he forced a smile, unable to hide the internal turmoil. During rehearsals, the director asked everyone to share a bit about themselves. When it was Jack's turn, he hesitated. He started, his voice trembling. I don't know if I want to talk. Go ahead, Jack. It's a safe space here, the director encouraged. He took a deep breath. My dad, he came back, and I don't know how to feel about it. The words came out like a confession. He abandoned me, and now he shows up as if nothing happened. I feel angry, and at the same time, I miss him. His peers listened in silence, empathy filling the room, and this is tearing me apart. I don't know what to do with these feelings. The play continued, but Jack felt lighter after expressing what he had kept inside. At the end of the rehearsal, he approached the director. Thank you for letting me speak. I really needed that. You did well, Jack. Sometimes putting feelings into words is the first step toward healing. The director smiled, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to write, her words flowing like a liberated river. It's time to confront my past, she wrote, to understand not only what I lost but also what I gained. The determination to reevaluate her life was taking shape into something tangible, and she knew that the path ahead would require courage. Ethan, for his part, was determined to open up to Jack. He looked at the computer screen, ready to send an email to his son. Let's talk. I want to hear you. I want to be a real father. With those words, each of the three began to embark on their journey of reconnection and self-discovery, each in their own way, but all in search of a new beginning. Ethan Parker was immersed in a storm of emotions when, after leaving the party, the truth about David began to take shape in his mind like a looming shadow. He had never imagined that David's presence, which seemed to be a safe harbor for Sarah and Jack, could have a darker side. Upon entering his luxurious Manhattan apartment, Ethan felt the weight of responsibility. The image of Jack, his son, had burned in his mind like an indelible mark. He needed to confront David, not only for Jack but also for Sarah, who deserved to know the truth. The next morning the sun lit up the city, but Ethan was far from feeling rejuvenated. He decided he could no longer postpone the conversation he had in mind. With determination pulsing in his chest, he headed to the cafe where David often took Sarah for breakfast. Upon entering, he spotted David sitting at a table, distracted by his phone. David's face, which had previously seemed so confident, now displayed a vulnerability that Ethan had not noticed before. David? Ethan's voice was firm but not hostile. David looked up, surprised to see Ethan there, but quickly recovered. Ethan, what are you doing here? David struggled to sound casual, but there was tension in the air. We need to talk. It's about Sarah and Jack, Ethan said, pulling out a chair and sitting down. David frowned, a look of concern crossing his face. About what exactly? About you and your past. Jack found out that you're not exactly who you seem to be. He's suffering, and you know it. Ethan shot back, feeling adrenaline coursing through his body. Or David averted his gaze, the unease evident on his face. What do you mean by that? If you truly care about Sarah and Jack, you need to be honest with them. You can't keep hiding what you've done, Ethan insisted, his voice rising a bit. You don't know what you're talking about, David shot back, now more defensive. I'm here for them. I love them. Love isn't just words, David. It's also about responsibility. If you love Sarah, you need to let her know who you really are. And Jack, he needs a father who has no secrets. Ethan countered, his frustration growing. Silence hung between them, heavy as lead. David was clearly struggling internally. I'm not perfect, Ethan. No one is. But I'm trying to be a father to Jack. I can't change the past. But you can be honest about it. What you've hidden from Sarah and Jack can't be ignored. They deserve to know. If you don't come clean, you'll end up destroying their lives, Ethan said, his voice softer, trying to reach David's humanity. David finally found the courage to look Ethan in the eyes. You have no idea what I've been through. I'm not the villain in this story. I was a second chance for Sarah and I don't want to lose her, he confessed, his voice trembling. And you think hiding the truth will keep Sarah by your side? That will only push her away and Jack will end up feeling more betrayed than he already does. He needs a father who is real, not a substitute, Ethan replied, his firmness turning into an appeal. David took a deep breath, his expression shifting. What do you suggest I do? Confront your past. Talk to her. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to have a real chance. Love can't exist in an environment of lies, Ethan said, feeling a wave of empathy for the man who had somehow become his rival. The conversation stretched on for a few more minutes, with Ethan insisting that David take responsibility. Finally, David nodded, appearing defeated but also relieved. You're right. I can't keep going like this. I need to tell the truth to Sarah and Jack. Ethan stood up, feeling that perhaps they had taken an important step. I hope you find the strength to do what's right. They deserve it. And if you need help, I'm here. David looked into Ethan's eyes, and for a brief moment, they shared a mutual understanding. Thank you, Ethan. I'll do it. As Ethan left the cafe, he felt a mix of hope and apprehension. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also believed that by confronting his ghosts, David would have a chance at redemption. Now all that remained was to hope that Sarah and Jack could find the understanding and forgiveness they so desperately needed. It was a new beginning, not just for him and David, but also for the family that could still be united despite the scars of the past. We've reached the end of this touching story. If you enjoyed it and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Right now, there's a playlist of videos on your screen. If you want to keep watching these moving stories, just click on it to start. And now tell us in the comments which city you're watching from, and leave a like to support our work. Now, a sincere question. Do you agree with what happened in the story? We'd love to hear your opinion. Until the next video.